Welcome to the special meeting of the Madera City Council. Today is Thursday, June 16th, 2022, and it is now 6:10 p.m. The council chambers will be open to the public. This meeting will also be available for public viewing and participation through Zoom. Members of the public may also observe the live stream meeting on the city's website at www.madera.gov/live. Members of the public may comment on agenda items at the meeting or remotely through an electronic meeting via phone by dialing 669-900-6833. Enter ID 874-8642-9538 hashtag. Comments will also be accepted via email at citycouncilpubliccomment@madera.gov or by regular mail at 205 West 4th Street, Madera, California, 93637. This meeting is now called to order. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
Mayor Garcia.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans. Here. Councilmember Gallegos.
Here.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Montes.
Here.
Councilmember Mejia.
Here.
Councilmember Villegas. You're on mute, Councilmember Villegas. Councilmember Villegas, can you please unmute yourself?
Okay, I'm here.
You.
Thank you very much, Alicia. And now let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please begin. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
We'll also do the invocation by Mayor Pro Tem Anita Evans.
Gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this day, Lord. Thank you for bringing each and every one of us here safely today, Father. Thank you for watching over this city and also for this council here, the members here in this chambers. Father, we ask that you remove self out of the way and allow your words to come through. Continue to watch over us and keep us, Father, blessing our families and protecting each and every one of us. And we just say thank you, Father God, in your son's precious name, Christ Jesus. Amen.
I'm asking my colleagues if there's any changes or additions to the agenda. Seeing none, I'll take a motion, please.
So moved to approve the agenda as presented.
Second. Motion to approve the agenda by Councilwoman Gallegos, second by Councilmember Montes. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gallegos.
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes.
Councilmember Montes.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans.
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia.
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas.
Yes.
Mayor Garcia.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. We will now go under public comment. Members of the public shall have an opportunity to address the City Council regarding the following agenda items when the item is called. Speakers should limit their comments to 3 minutes. Number A is administrative reports. A1 draft capital improvement program for fiscal year 2022-2023 until fiscal year 2026-27. I believe, Mr. Helmuth, you have this item?
Thank you, Mayor and Council members. Are we visible online?
Yes, we can.
Let's see. I thought I was following the instructions.
Online is showing that one.
Yeah. Hey, somebody's jumping in. Is that Mark?
This was last year.
Yeah, excuse me a second.
You're good. Thank you. Anyway, again, thank you, Mayor and council members. This presentation is for the City of Madera Capital Improvement Program, fiscal years 22-23 through fiscal year 26-27. And the purpose of this workshop is to provide an overview of the 22-23, 26-27 Capital Improvement Program, also known as the CIP. We usually refer to it as the CIP when you hear us talking about it. Also to receive input from council. And then eventually at the end of this meeting, we'll be asking for approval of the minute order accepting the report. Also to seek authorization to submit the CIP to the Planning Commission for determination of conformity. And we'll just go ahead and do a few staff introductions right now. And I'm going to move something out of my field of vision. Myself, I'm Keith Helmuth, city engineer, and we also have Ellen Bitter here. She will be presenting the vast majority of the presentation tonight. And Frank Holguin, our construction manager, and Nicole Say. They are all instrumental in the delivery of the CIP projects that we have. Additionally, we have multiple CIP project managers on hand tonight. We have Randy Bell, he is in the audience. Steve Betancourt also here. Matt Bolles, he will be online. Alexis Raimundo, he is out today sick, and Jonathan Gramajo, he is also online. And we have also Matt in the audience and several department heads online as well. A capital improvement program. The CIP is a multi-year planning document used by the city to identify capital improvement projects and coordinate the financing and timing of the projects. The CIP is a 5-year plan that identifies projects, priorities, and financing that goes with the project, with those projects. It's subject to change for a variety of reasons. Council prioritization, that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. Council will have the opportunity to look at the CIP and ask questions about where we have the projects planned based upon what we've done in advance of this meeting. If you see anything you would like to discuss and change, please bring it up with us. Funding changes. You will see that there will be periodically funding changes. If you compare year to year, you might see that funding has moved from one source or from one project to another. We do that on the basis of sometimes timing of the funding or we sometimes just some funding works better for this project versus another. So it's sometimes a balancing act or a shuffling of the funding, so to speak. Staffing availability is another. Project delays, emergency needs. Periodically through the year, we do jump onto other things that have a priority that needs to get done fairly quickly. For instance, if there is a grant application that needs to go in, we will go ahead and do that. The CIP is adopted at the same time as the city budget. So at the time that the city budget is adopted, the CIP will usually feather in at the back of that document. Tweaking is continuous through the budget adoption process. The CIP funding is annually appropriated, again coinciding with the CIP project or budget process. Those projects are shown in the 22-23 in the CIP. Those typically will be actually budgeted I'll go ahead and say the city budget again. Those out years, 23, 24 or later, those won't actually show up in the budget themselves. General plan conformity. State law requires that the city prepare a capital improvement program, the CIP, to submit the CIP to the Planning Commission for review and to find that the CIP is in conformance with the general plan. Our general plan makes certain assumptions about what the city wants to see, whether it's the type of zoning, how things are built. The general plan lays out a roadmap. Any projects that we show in the CIP needs to conform to the general plan. State law also requires a general plan conformity finding for acquisition or disposition of land, vacation or abandonment of streets, or acquisition of construction of public buildings. The CIP process, it's a little bit more involved than many people might think. We do have multiple guiding documents. The general plan starts at the top. It guides the community and where we're going with how we see the city building. A vision plan, that's the 2025 vision plan. Specific plans Generally speaking, certain developments, many developments will have a specific plan that dives into what they want to see. How do they want a house to look, as an example? What's the character of the neighborhood? The MCTC's active transportation plan. They've adopted an active transportation for walking plan for walking and biking projects. That is out there, and we also refer to that. Impact fee programs. The city does have an impact fee program, covers, I rarely count them, but 12 or 13 different categories. Many of those categories are affected directly with capital projects. There's sewer, water, storm drains, streets, water wells, and those are generally something that we'll reference. If we have funding coming through the impact fee program, then we have the ability to fund one part of a project. And special studies, sewer and water assessment is an example. That's been moving forward for several years, and it's actually been throwing off a few projects that we are doing today. One of the things that came out of the sewer and water assessments was the Avenue 13 identification that there was a problem with that pipe. It deteriorated to the point where we needed to move a project forward. That's an example of a special study. And staff review of current needs and available or new sources of funding. Needs related to progressive growth. Growth is to some degree still accelerating. Sometimes in the eyes of staff, we see projects are popping up here and there, and those have an effect on how we move forward with the CIP and different projects. One of the things that is probably the most important to keep track of is our water situation. Our water well can handle somewhere in excess of about 600 single-family dwelling units, and we need to go ahead and make certain that as growth occurs, that we plan for future water wells. So that's example of the needs related to growth. Internal discussions on priorities, schedules, funding. It can pop up in any number of different ways. We do talk regularly about where we see things going, and we will adjust on that basis. And then eventually it comes to council for approval on what we discuss. Risk assessments, I'd go ahead and say that the sewer and water assessments is generally along that area, but we do periodically have things happen. We have to do a risk assessment, and things do rise to the surface. CIP is typically funded through non-general fund sources. Special revenue funds, gas tax is what we pay at the pump, RSTP, Measure T, the voter-approved program for paying for road improvements. Measure T, we're in the process of moving that forward right now. There will be a council item coming forward, we believe July 6th, that'll be asking council to review and approve a ballot going on in November for the purposes of doing a renewal to the Measure T program. Additionally, Measure K, which is fire and police, SB1, RMRA. RMRA represents $1.4 million to us this next year in terms of the ability to go ahead and pay for resurfacing of roadways. Impact fees, transit sources. Transit has a multitude of sources, airport sources, FAA program, other local and regional sources, and then COVID impacts. We did see funding come through there. The CIP council approval. The CIP session represents an opportunity for council to provide guidance and direction. We are open to any questions that you have, any questions or comments. Please direct us as you see fit. Ultimately, approval occurs during the budget approval process. So what you say here, we'll look to go ahead and bring it into the approval process. Some projects are created and funded outside of the city budget process. When those happen, we will take those to council separately. Regardless of the direction received here, staff will submit projects not previously conformed to Planning Commission for approval. There's been an occasion where a project comes up separately and we know it's going to move forward to council at some point and then go to construction. We'll include that in the conformance with Planning Commission. We deem it important that they do conform, and so we do the best to make certain that every project that moves forward in the city does see that. We do have a number of accomplishments this year. We had about $1.9 million in pavement rehabilitation, seals and overlays, including curb access ramp upgrades. $438,000 in new sidewalks serving James Madison Elementary School and Martin Luther King Middle School and Rose Elementary. The Olive Avenue utility undergrounding over there, well, Olive Avenue. You still see poles up, but we're moving forward. I think one of the things that is going on right now, and Alan can talk to more detail, is we're getting ready to go ahead and have the wiring moved underground, but there is a connection going underneath the railroad. That's one of the last things on that. There was a replacement of water mains in Dunham and Lewis Street. That was an important thing. We moved fairly quickly on that particular project. When the self-help community went in over there behind the Carl's Jr. off Madera Avenue, it was determined that there were some pressure issues. And what we saw in there when they cut into the pipe, the cast iron pipes had nodules in there that was basically corroding, and the pipe was doing something like this. And because we had a larger structure going in and there was need for fire flow in excess of what a single family house might need, we felt the need to go ahead and upgrade those water lines, and those were done quickly. We actually had to work with the state to get special approval to install one of the water lines closer to a sewer line that would normally be done. We ended up putting in cast iron pipe in one section just to go ahead and make certain it would work and not have somebody tell us we violated health department rules. Accomplishments and pictures. Adele Street resurfacing. You'll note on this particular picture on Adele Street that there's a strip of pavement off to the left of the street. That is a new pathway. And this is the first time that we've actually done a new pathway in conjunction with an overlay, a state overlay. I'm not sure there's much of that street left over when we got done with it. Did we actually overlay it, Ellen, or did it just sort of crumble out? Okay, but that was one of the first times, and that came from council direction and need. We felt that it was important after doing it, and I've something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I think we're going to move forward any time that we have these type of locations where we have students. It's something that we need to do. Sunrise Avenue, Schnorr Avenue. You see that the streets have been resurfaced through there, and they're looking pretty good. Accomplishments and highlights continued. This is an example of $1.25 million in consultant engineering contracts. Those contracts turned into $18.4 million in construction projects. We're looking to move more projects out to consultants, and I think between Ellen and I will talk a little bit more in detail about what we're doing with that, but we want to go ahead and get more projects out to consultants. Upcoming engineering services contracts. The AHSC grant, that is moving forward. We're expecting, or we have received. Have we received? We have received an RFP for design on that. And that's 5 miles of sidewalks, 3 miles, I believe, of bike lanes and the like. So that has to be completed by July 2024, I believe. But that's a fairly major improvement to the city of Madera with regard to sidewalks. Actually, it says 3+ miles of sidewalk because where was I'm getting a head nod. It's 3 miles because where it's 5. On-call engineering services. We do have an RFP out. We received it. We received results on that. And did we final at 12? We finaled at 12 engineering firms submitting on-call services with the city. Something we've been wanting to do for some time, but this is going to help us accelerate projects and get them onto the street and give us more flexibility. On-call contracts give us flexibility in terms of letting contracts. With that, I'm going to invite Ellen Bitter up, and she's going to take the rest of the presentation. She'll periodically introduce some other department heads as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. It's great to be here in person. I have not been at the podium for over 2 years, so I was a little rusty, actually. So I'll be presenting this year's 5-year CIP plan and highlighting the projects that are scheduled to move forward in 22-23. We've got 106 projects listed for 22-23. We won't be talking about all of them, but we're going to hit the ones that we think are significant. And then, of course, welcome any other discussions on projects that maybe we didn't talk about. Oh, actually, I want to go back. So I put the table of contents of the CIP to kind of give a walkthrough of the document. The very first section is a 4-page list of projects separated by department. That's the summary. That's the in a nutshell, what we're looking at. It's $61 million of projects in 22-23, and as I said, 106 projects. Following that, separated by department, are individual project detail sheets for each project. It's got more of a description, and it's got the time frame of when the different phases move forward, and it's got the funding sources for each of those projects. And then the third section is how we balance everything. It's where we compile all of our sources of funding, and we've listed the projects that are programmed against it, and we can see how we stand. Is there still money available to program to other projects? Have we over-programmed and need to shuffle where projects land? And we rely on that throughout the year. If we need additional funding for a project, we look at any balance left, and that's where we can get it from. In the appendix is a description of each of the funding sources to help understand, whether it's state or federal and any specific requirements. And then lastly, there's a glossary of terms. We're very familiar with engineering terms. The general public may not be, so hopefully that helps. So the different department project categories are the airport, and that's their planning documents, and this implements their projects. There is a community development category. Right now, it just covers the potential relocation for City Hall. The engineering section covers most of the projects. It's road projects, it's sewer projects, storm drain, traffic signals. Everything that doesn't fall under any other department lands in engineering. Fire department has identified several improvements at their facilities. There's one project for the police department funded with the Measure K, and that is to improve an existing parking lot so they can use it for their staff parking and housing a few other items, facility or equipment that police has. The parks and community services projects vary from bike paths to community center improvements to park improvements. So they've got quite a variety. Public Works addresses the sewer and water and major equipment replacement. The meters, water meters sometimes fall under them, and also the wastewater treatment plant projects fall under Public Works. The RDA Successor Agency has a few projects still on the books, and those are also included in the CIP. And then Transit has projects for their implementing their new programs and or improvements to their facilities. So at this time, I will turn it over to Adam, and he will present the airport projects if he's here with us.
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can. We have Council Member Rodriguez wanting to ask a question.
Okay.
Ellen, I know you brought up some of the projects. With the projects that are in our CIP, some of them don't have the list, but they don't have dates as far as when construction, like for parks and stuff. Is that something that we go through this exercise to see when we can get something going, or is that going to be as funds are available?
If there's not a construction date specified, it's probably just the preliminary planning phases, and that sets us up to be able to apply for grants. And then once we receive grant funding, then we would be programming it in the CIP. Sometimes you'll see a project with a funding source of undetermined. That means there is no funding identified, and generally it wouldn't move forward to construction unless funds were identified.
Thank you.
Continue.
Okay. So for the airport, we had two CIP projects entered in for 22 and 23. The first one was AIP 31, which is the apron and taxiway drainage improvement project. We just finished the design for the project, while our engineering consultants did back in February, I believe. And it was sent out for bid. Well, the construction phase was sent out to bid in March of this year. And we received about 6 different bids from 6 different companies. And the lowest bidder, which is the corporation that we recommended, is AG Construction. However, right now we're just awaiting our essentially approval from the FAA saying that we can go with this company and for their portion of the grant funding, which is about $1.1 million. And according to our consultants, FAA is really behind on the approval of these grants right now. So they're not anticipating the start of this construction phase before the end of July of this year. We also did have AIP 45, which is our airport layout plan narrative. That one was originally scheduled for 22-23. However, our consultants did change this around and moved it to 2028, since they said that our runway and taxiway mill and fill projects are a higher priority. So they moved those projects up to 24 and 26 and moved AIP 45 to 2028. And yeah, those are the 2 projects for the airport.
Any questions for Adam?
Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. Adam, the question I have is 21-22 and 22-23 on the CIPs. We haven't had anything in that bar graph for funds. And so now we see 23-24 and 24-25. We have FFA and Caltrans funding. That's only coming through 23-24?
Are you looking at the graph on here?
I'm looking at our packets, our CIP packets.
Or a CIP packet? Yes, those are correct.
So it's because we're only getting funding in those years.
Yes. That's the amount that we're applying for in those years.
So the question I have is, I've had a lot of airport pilots and people that work in the airport have concerns that we have a lot of potholes that those planes are having issues with in the taxi areas. And so they're saying that, tax dollars are going towards the airport, but we're not seeing much movement happening there. So what I'm to tell them now that this isn't going to happen until 23-25. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, I believe those are the mill and fill projects for the runways and the taxiways.
Okay. That's a long time, Adam. Thank you.
Please continue.
Okay, next up is fire. Chief Watson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is the same projects that were approved last year. I had a great lesson in city government, or government in general, is the times of government, the wheels of government turn a little slower than I'm used to. But one of the projects you'll see at your next council meeting is finally the approval of demoing the house behind the fire station and India Park. So that is some of these projects that are here before you tonight. The renovation of the bathroom and installation of covered parking, new fencing, and demo of that existing building behind Station 56 is one of them. As you know, one of the bathrooms, the floor is bubbling up in the main bathroom, and that's the only bathroom that had a shower. So the firefighters were able to remodel one of the bathrooms and add turn a half bath into a full bath. That project did get completed this year. They did renovate one of their rooms into a gym, and they did add drought tolerant landscaping in the front of the fire station. That project had to be completed first. So our goal is in 22, 23 to figure out why the floor is bubbling up in the bathroom. And this project should be easily moved forward now that that's complete. Station 57, there was a needs assessment approved last year, and that'll kind of look at updating the fire station to give it some more life and let it continue to be operated as a fire station. And again, with our hot summers around here, installation of covered parking. Station 58, installation of parking and extend the current fencing to the back of the property. The city already owns the fence, so we just need to get the fence work put up. Here's some of the photos. You can see the little sink in the bathroom. That's the house that's going to get demoed, and the transformation of the little classroom into a working gym. Below is the shower. The painting, the tile work, flooring was all done by fire department. Public Works did all the electrical and moving of the water pipes. Probably should have turned the camera down a little lower, but you can see the artificial turf there in front of Station 56. If you drive by, it really changed the look of the station and makes the station pop when you drive by. That's it for the fire department. Oh, yes, here's another photo. This is the same room at Station 57 that got completed at 56. And that is they've already started the demo on the room. They've ripped the old carpet out. Some old cabinets, and they'll start transforming that room. The photo on the right is Station 57. You can see the new parking lot that was completed the year prior, but the gate entrance back there, that's one of the things when they look at modernization of that fire station is that could be a drive-through, a fueling area back there. Only one of our stations currently has a fueling station, and during power outages or some type of natural disaster, it's imperative that we have fuel on site to continue operations for a couple days at a time. So thank you.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Councilmember Gallegos, I think, had her.
You can go ahead and go first, Councilman.
Question for you, Chief. And I'm sorry, you may have covered this, but when I look at that house, it still looks in decent shape. We're going to demo that, and what's going to happen with that lot?
The plan is for the city to try to secure that area. So at 56, when it's time to rebuild 56, it gives the city some options on what they can do with that lot. That is probably one of the Station 58. Obviously, was the location of that station was picked based on response times. As the city's grown, Station 56 has continued to be a great location with the kind of the five-way intersection there. So if that station can be turned, moved, if it needs to be rebuilt and not renovated, then it gives the city some options.
So at this time, I know the demo is in process, but is that house not habitable?
The homeless went through and they've taken all the electrical out, all of the AC, the heater, and the building, as soon as the city took possession of it, it was within about 4 days before we got it secured, and the homeless had stripped that house and gutted that house.
Really? Okay. Just from the outside, it still looks like in good shape. And you also mentioned that the firefighters had renovated the restroom?
Yes.
Okay. And then you kept on saying they. So is that who's doing all these renovations? Is your firefighter?
Yeah. So the firefighters, while they're on duty, in order to save costs, versus going out to bid, going prevailing wage is a lot of our folks have other skills other than just putting out fire. So some of that is construction. A lot of guys do construction on the side and at home, and you can see the tile work. Tile work for some, it's an art form, and the tile work there is beautiful.
You wouldn't happen to have their card, would you? It's really good. It's really good work. That's what I'm saying. You kept on saying they. I go, impressive. Okay, so and that's great because they are saving the costs for doing most of this work here. So yeah, great work. Man, it looks really good. Yeah,
like the yard work, putting artificial turf in, running the tractors down in the river. All these guys have, they're guys and gals that work there have have skills other than just firefighting. So we try to tap those resources we can.
No fires in the next couple of months. They can probably put up a house too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I was trying to get them to tear down that house, but I guess engineering has all kinds of rules and waiting periods and asbestos inspections. So
thank you for keeping your costs down there, Chief. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. Chief, thank you for bringing these forth for fire. I know that the renovation, like covered parking and fencing and demolition of this building, but I don't see here, and I mean, we have CIPs all the way for 25, 26. I don't see renovations for the sleep quarters for 56 and 57. My colleagues have all been in those fire stations, and we are not happy having our firefighters in those quarters 24/7. I mean, that is their home. And so I was a little disappointed not to have seen some type of CIP come forth for that. And a lot of this is to 25, 26. I'm hoping that we have something that we can put in place for that. Like demolition in this building, I know this one house is important, but the sleep quarters where they sleep every night is another important factor. I don't know how my colleagues feel about that, but they've all been in those stations and have seen where they sleep, and it's been like that since these fire stations have been built, and we're talking 50 something years that we built those stations.
Yeah, so that's part of that. That's in your packet. That's that feasibility, that modernization study. That all has to be done by an architect, and we can't put until we know cost and needs. And so that's part of that, is we don't want to put too much money into these fire stations if they're not going to be viable for another 10, 20, 30 years. And I think they do need some major renovation, and without having an architect, and that's what those funds are for, is to cover those architect fees, to have them do that feasibility study on the fire stations, because it may just need to be upgraded. They may need to demo part of the building. And so yes, and that's the first step, is getting that part done. And once that's completed, then I think we'll look at the bigger picture in the bigger budget. And as we know, fire stations are very expensive. You know, I talked about the prevailing wage, but now when you add in a fire station or a police station, it's essential services. So adding prevailing wage adds a third to the cost. Adding essential service building adds another third to the cost. So what would cost someone $1 is going to cost the city $3 for a fire station or a police station. So that feasibility study will cover what needs to be upgraded and what can be upgraded. And we don't want to throw good money at bad. So we don't want to spend, $100,000 adding something today when it's only going to be there for 5 or 10 years. So once that study is complete as part of this CIP, then that kind of gives us the roadmap to where we need to go in the future. That way we're spending dollars where they're best spent.
Yeah, I understand that. But just if we could have put a page in there that's saying, just like this is saying improvements to the housing of our firefighters, could have put there. And I mean, a lot of these pages don't have dollars attached to it. It's just like City Hall. We're not going to have a City Hall for quite a few years, but we still have it listed. And finally, we have money that has been put towards it now. And the money is not there for 25, 26, but every year since I've been on council for 6 years, it's been 0, 0, 0. But we still have a page saying that this is something the residents want. This is something the city wants. I would have hoped to have had a page saying the sleeping quarters for 56, 57, not saying without a feasibility study. And I get that, but just to let us know that that is something that we're looking forward and looking to. To me, that I thought I was going to at least see that in this CIP.
Well, and I can correct myself, but that's what the feasibility study is. And I think to try to keep that document shorter, there's a lot of things that are going to be needed within that.
Right, but just a blank statement. Just a blank statement, just like City Hall, blank statement, just saying that this is what we're looking to the future for.
And we'll make sure we add that language in next time.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans.
Yes, I just want to say thank you. The artificial turf looks great out there. When I saw the guys out digging it up, I didn't know what was going on. So I'm nosy, and I kept going back and forth. And then finally I saw it laying. So it looks very good. So, hey, that is an improvement right there. The river looks great, you guys. And I just want to say thank you for everything that you do and for your service. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much.
Good, and welcome Councilwoman Mejia to the dais.
Yeah. I was online. I was on Zoom.
No, we knew that. We knew that. Oh, so we're going to be removing the new city hall monies over to the fire department for housing and new bedrooms.
Sounds good. Huh? Sounds good.
Hey, you know what?
25, 26.
You know, we don't need to do city hall. We do need housing for the
Yes.
fire department. Okay.
All right. Next, I'd like to introduce Joseph Hebert for the Parks Project. He's on Zoom.
Welcome, Joseph.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Do you have the next slide or? Oh, there we go. Okay. So in your packet, you'll probably see there's about 18 different CIP projects for the Parks Department. Out of that 18, there's 6 basically with undetermined funds. There's another 7 that looks like they've been on the CIP agenda for a little while and have been kicked down the road for a few years. So I chose to focus on the projects, the 5 projects that had the most visibility and the most opportunity to move forward at the moment. So starting at the top, we're looking at the Olive Park project. We actually received a grant award for $1.9 million. The contract, we're looking to award a contract to a design services firm that will be in for approval on the next council meeting on 7/6. We did receive a grant for Fresno River cleanup, which is $832,000. We also are looking, yes. We're also looking at India Park. And it's an 8-acre park to be built on Austin Street, just east of Jack Desmond Middle School. There is a contract award for demolition and design services. I think the chief mentioned, but the design services piece will be included in the, I guess, the next council meeting for approval. The team will also, thanks to the mayor, will be looking at visiting with some potential donors to move this project forward in the near future. There's also Sunset Park, which is a nearly 1-acre park to be built on Sunset Avenue between Liberty and Westberry. Again, the same contract award for design services pending and will be presented at the next council meeting for approval. Also, the Town and Country Connectivity Project, I think that was on last year's CIP, but we did submit a grant application in April of this year for $7.1 million. And those are the projects that I think I have the clearest line of sight as far as moving forward. There's some other projects that are smaller, dealing with Frank Burgon and the Pan Am improvement. It looks like they've been on here for quite a few years. I've got to peel back the onion to look at those, but it's not real clear how we're going to fund those yet. So these are the 5 that I think have the most potential, and they're going to probably eat up a lot of my resources as well. Questions?
I have a question.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Mr. Everett, I wanted to ask you in regards to the application that was submitted for Town and Country, what is the probability and what does a grant like this, what are their turnaround time to get some type of a decision? Or, I mean, I know that we're shooting for 7.1 million, but what are the probability of even,
Well, again, I think, there's been some discussion. This was the, I guess, to Jim Costa. And I think we have our fingers crossed that he's gonna come through for us this time. I think this is his final year for this district, so we're hopeful that something will come to fruition before the end of the year.
and I'm glad you mentioned that because I wanted to make sure his name was said here. And
yeah, I was going to put the Costa grant on there, and I decided not to. So.
Because if he's watching, then he knows how important it is for us to try to, our parks, not necessarily just Town and Country, but all parks in the city of Madera. Right. And if you're watching, Mr. Costa, greatly help us out with this. It'd be great to have that $7.1 million. Thank you.
Is that it, Joseph? Is there any more
That's
questions?
it for me. That's it for me.
Gallegos.
Joseph, I just wanted to commend and thank you for looking at Centennial Park and the pool complex on putting in construction phase for the shade in the existing playground area, and the pool area is so needed for, hopefully we're going to be using that pool more often now that we have a diving board in there. And so we have schools that usually kind of come to that, but again, there's not that shade, and in Madera it's triple digits. So thank you for putting that in there. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's been there for a little while, and that's that. I don't know how optimistic I am with completing that, but it's in there. And you know, if I can, I have a number of projects that are just waiting for the right funding or the right grant opportunity, and that's one of them. So
perfect. Thank you.
You don't have anything else, Joseph? I think that's it.
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is transit, and David Huff will be presenting.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. So this year with transit, we're looking to have a busy year, but this purpose was to go about highlighting some of our two biggest projects. Trans 10, I know earlier Keith, he mentioned as far as some of the off-site improvement of projects that are related to the veteran housing projects, and this is one of them. So the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities Grant is to call for the improvements at the Madera Intermodal Center, and then even transit enhancements. The total project should not exceed no more than $593,000. Now, some of the details within that project, we're looking at sustainable transportation infrastructure, and then also transportation-related amenities. Just to give a bit more details with the transit development enhancements at the Madera Intermodal Center, which will involve the renovation of the Intermodal Transit Center, the installment of bike racks, the installment of a water fountain, and then even improved signage at the center, and then even the bus stops. Bus stops, one of the things that it does calls for the improvement of signage and the bus stops. They must be within a 1 mile radius of the project area, which is the intermodal and the veteran homes themselves. So that's where those improvements have to take place. Some of the other areas we're looking at doing as far as transit technology enhancements was the installment of automatic vehicle locator, which is referred to as AVL, LED display sign at the Intermodal Center, 19 onboard multimedia infotainment system, and then computer-aided dispatch system, which is referred to as CAD. Now, just to give a bit of a description of the AVL and CAD system, and it's pretty much what it explains, what it is, automatic vehicle locator. So we're looking to release another RFP for the advancement of or the enhancement of our transit technology. What that's going to cost for the operator and then even a passenger, so they could go online right if they're looking at a desktop, or right if they download a transit app to where they actually have the GPS location of that transit vehicle live tracking. It'll even be tied into as far as bus arrival times, right if they're sitting at the bus, right if they're waiting at the Intermodal Center, saying a bus will be arriving within 5 minutes, or we'll even look to add signage at certain key bus stops, letting them know when their bus is arriving. Even when it comes to the computer-aided dispatch system, I know some of our greatest concerns with our dollar ride passengers, even with our ADA paratransit passengers. Right now, if you make a reservation through Dollar Ride, our policy is that the bus will pick you up within a 30-minute window. But yet, when it comes to some of our seniors and elders, their greatest concern is, okay, now I have to wait out in the heat or the cold for 30 minutes. There's no courtesy notification that goes out letting them know when their bus is coming or getting closer. It just pretty much says, okay, well, your bus, you need to wait for 30 minutes. The CAD system, what that pretty much does, as the bus gets within a certain radius of your house, right? If you have a cell phone, it'll send you a text message letting you know that your bus will be arriving within a couple of minutes. Or if you have a phone, it'll be a computer system where it'll automatically give you a call letting you know that your bus is arriving. So it's basically to go about enhancing things, making things be more efficient. The 19 onboard multimedia infotainment system, it's pretty much onboard TVs in a sense. And with those TVs, anything that's related as far as the area of information, marketing, technology, things related to the city information in a sense. That's pretty much the infotainment system there. There's a lot of things, as I mentioned, that will be taking place within Trans within next year. Some of them are being a replacement of some of our older transit vehicles. Currently now we have our 26 transit buses that are used for dollar ride, or even our 88 paratransit. But the greatest concern with that is if a senior needs to make a doctor's visit, you have a large 26-foot bus trying to maneuver through a physician's office. Even though there hasn't been any accident, it still has increased liability for it. So what we're looking to do is add minivans to our fleet, 88 paratransit minivans, which is just a basic minivan that'll have a wheelchair ramp or loading ramp. So therefore, it makes maneuvering much easier, much more convenient for the individual, et cetera. So as I mentioned, these are some of our major projects that are taking place. Let's go to the next slide, Trans 10. Excuse me, Trans 11, I'm sorry. It's Trans 11 there? Oh, okay. Yeah, so now even as far as the next one, the Trans 11, which is the Transit Center Charging Station, this is part of the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Program, CMAQ. But this program is not to exceed $587,000. This was an award that the city received several years back, and we're looking to execute it this year, to where it calls for the purchase of one electric bus and then the installment of one charging station at the transit center itself. So again, as I mentioned, though we're looking to execute on several projects, these are the two main projects we would like to highlight for transit. So do you guys have any questions at all?
Councilwoman Gay.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
David, I just wanted to thank you. I know it's a team effort on those transit signs. Thank you so much. We've been waiting for those for a few years, and the technology that's going to be put in the buses, that was another concern that the council had. So I'm glad to see that all is coming forth. So thank you for that.
Are you welcome, Council?
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. David, so would this be the first purchase that Madera buys? It's a electrical bus?
Yes, this would be the first one.
And on this particular model, what's the rating on that? I mean, I'm assuming that this is going to be something that's, well, revolutionary for us here at the city, obviously, where we're trying to reduce emissions. And I think with the natural gas, I think we've been doing that, but with this electric bus and charging station, could you see us doing this? I mean, I'm sure this is going to become something that we'll be replacing our fleet with, right?
Yes, it is something that we are going to replace in our fleet. I know I believe it's 2040, the mandate where your entire transit fleet has to be zero emissions, right? If it's electrical or hydrogen fuel. There are pros and cons with each. Of course, we are looking to go about doing an electric bus and basically to see the benefits of that and see if it meets our needs. The pros and cons in comparison, when you look at an electric charge bus, it's cheaper than a hydrogen fuel bus. But some of the other, depends on how you look at it, some of the negatives may be the lifespan of that bus, to where you're looking at an average of 7 to 10 years lifespan. Even as far as one charge, it may only last you about 100 miles for that day. While a hydrogen vehicle, even though it costs much more, the lifespan of that hydrogen vehicle is about 10 to 15 years. And then one fueling will last you about 300 miles. So in comparison, if we were to do electric buses to replace our entire fleet and still keep up with our service standards, even as we look to expand our service hours, for every one CNG bus, we'll probably have to look at getting 2 electrical buses just to meet that need. While with a hydrogen bus, though it may cost more, it may just be an even swap 1 and 1. So like I said, so with the electric bus, it may just be the start of a pilot program just to see if it meets our needs. Do that for a year, a couple of years or so. And then I know even as a mandate gets closer, as you begin to procure transit vehicles, the requirement is that X amount of your new purchases, percentage-wise, must be a zero emissions. So we will be transitioning, but at the same time, as I mentioned, which steps are we taking? Will we do solar or will we do hydrogen? So
yeah, and at what point, I'm assuming with maybe grant funding, we can consider the hydrogen?
Yes. With the grant funding, the benefit of the hydrogen, yes. Like I said, just because it will last much longer, even when it comes to providing the service. There are grant funds available that are coming, right? If it's a bipartisan infrastructure bill, the zero emissions, the funding is available, but the biggest push now is to focus on the infrastructure, right? If we go with solar, making sure we have the charging station, or even to go with the hydrogen fuel, do we build a hydrogen fuel station? Or do we reach out to one of the neighboring communities who may have a hydrogen fuel station now or looking to build and have the hydrogen delivered to us the same way as a tanker? So now with that approach, we don't have to worry about building a hydrogen fuel station. We just have to worry about delivery, and that's a cost savings.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to, especially fleets like this, we always look at our neighbors such as Madera Unified and see if maybe there might be a partnership where maybe the cost becomes a lot less when you consolidate agencies that can utilize, like you said, the hydrogen fuel. This is some conversation, obviously, with their facilities director, and hopefully we can partner up with not only Madera Unified, but maybe even the county government and their fleet.
Yes.
So that's something to consider. I know that it just makes more sense that we get one for one instead of two electric buses for one replacement that we do.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Thank you, David. Appreciate your time and presentation.
All right, thank you, Councilman Rodriguez.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, David, I want to say thank you. Thank you for the work that each and every one of you are doing. I want to highlight the fact of the dialer lift and using the minivans. That I really like that. I've used the dialer ride, dialer lift, dialer ride. I've used it before. I've been picked up on the bus where they've had to lift me up and, put me into the bus and those types of things. But to use a single minivan versus having to have the big bus maneuver throughout the neighborhood just to turn around and come back and pick you up in front of your home, the minivan is much more feasible. And I think that it's something that's a good idea that you guys are moving forward to. So thank you very much. And thank you for the work that you guys did.
Very welcome. Thank you, Councilwoman Evans.
Councilmember Montes.
I just have a really quick question. Thank you for the presentation, David, about the bus charger. Is that I'm assuming it's a little bit bigger than a regular electric vehicle charger. Would that be something that we could use on our other electric vehicles in our fleet with the charger?
I have seen examples of some of the chargers that are used on both large fleet and smaller fleet, but I'm not confident in answering it and saying, yes, it can be. But I have seen examples, but I haven't actually researched into it as far as what type of adapter we would need to get for something like that.
Oh, you can't just plug it in and charge it in 2 minutes or something, like quick charge, right? No?
Oh, yeah, no.
Just a question. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just make one last comment. It's funny to see that we're making full circle. Metropolitan areas that were highly urbanized at some point were using trolleys with they were electric, and I'm not saying decades later we're coming back to the same thing, and I can see why. But certainly, just the fact that we're having to come to a different type of mode of energy, it just it's hard to wrap my hand around the fact that we're coming back full circle. So just trying to make a comment.
Absolutely. And climate change is real. And the San Joaquin Valley has the highest rates of asthma in the country, in our area. So everything we can do to reduce our carbon footprint.
For sure. And this is why the CMAQ funds are important, right there, David?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's the main purpose for, like I said, to provide transit funds to reduce traffic congestion and improve air quality. That's the main purpose for CMAQ. Even when it comes to the LT Top program, pretty much the same thing to reduce personal vehicle use and to try to increase ridership for air quality improvement. So, and that's the biggest push from transit from the state down. CMAQ, LT Top, that's the greatest focus, zero emissions. So you'll start to see a lot of that within the coming years.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that report.
All right. Thank you, Council Mayor.
All right. Well, we'll be bringing it back into the chambers for a little bit here. Moving into enterprise funding projects. And these typically fund the water, sewer, and storm drain. They're not as visual of a project to see, but you really know when it's needed. So enterprise funds are the funds that are generated by the utility rates, the ratepayers, for water and sewer and storm drain. These projects typically address deteriorated or deficient systems. They will also make major repairs and or replacements to our systems, and they will provide funding for capacity improvements where if it's not meeting either our current or future needs for any of those facilities as well. Generally, those larger projects have already been identified in the master plans, and we're just implementing them either as needed or as projected. We will be advancing certain water projects to deal with the dropping water table and drought conditions. So that could be either in adding new wells into the system, or the large storage tank is also a drought resistance measure as well. As infill occurs in the urban area, sometimes that does require, similar to what Keith mentioned about the water main project, the self-help project, we needed to replace a water main to be able to serve that facility. This slide will start the discussion on the sewer projects that are proposed to be completed in 22-23, and these are not new projects. We have had to carry over for a couple of years just because as the number of projects that we are trying to deliver is great. I do want to give a shout out to Matt Bullis, he's on Zoom. He's one of our project managers, but he was instrumental in getting that on-call request for proposals out for engineering firms. And once we were able to bring all those contracts forward, basically it's a 3-year contract with these firms to do projects on task orders. So we've got, engineering firm A on contract, and when any of these projects come up, we're just handing them out to the engineers so they can get started with the design on them right away. It's going to cut months off of our project delivery process for these. So the projects that are listed here, all of those, with the exception of probably the last two, will be designed through that process. The second to last one, phase 2 of the condition assessment, that would be a continuation of our first contract with the Kell Engineering that did the initial condition assessments for our sewer and water system. And then the last project on the list, the Avenue 13 sewer trunk main, we have a contract for design services. We have a scoping memo in hand and some estimates, and I think we are comfortable in what we have initially estimated the project would cost. There's no surprises coming our way, so we hope that that project will be moving forward this year. This is a map of that project. It's almost 5 miles from Schnorr all the way out to the wastewater treatment plant. We have secured funding thanks to Congressman Costa. It is written into the bill. I've seen it. Haven't seen any checks come through yet, but we're working on that. And then possibly securing additional funds as well. We're hoping that we can do phase 1 and phase 2 at the same time, just to achieve cost savings in the contract administration and pumping and traffic control and all that's associated with that. In the following years, we hope to advance the rehabilitation of the Schnorr Avenue trunk sewer main. We want to start a program of annual video inspection. So we'll break up the city into, I don't know if it's quadrants or what, but we'll have a budget, and that's how many miles of sewer pipeline we can camera a year. And then we also have established a budget of $1.4 million to start doing the rehabilitation, replacement, repairs on all those pipes that have been identified. And they're just, even if they are not showing as visually deteriorated to a terrible extent, they're over 100 years old, some of these pipes. So we're going to be proactive and start replacing them before they really show their age. And I would like Matt to present this slide. He's been helping Public Works with some of their projects out at the wastewater treatment plant. You're up, Matt.
Hello, Matthew Bullis here. I'm a senior engineer part-time with the city. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor and Council. These are projects at the wastewater treatment plant. First, can you hear me? I'm always uncertain if you can hear me or not.
We're good.
Okay, sounds good. These are wastewater treatment plant related projects. The first project on the list is the permit renewal project. Currently, the state of California Water Quality Control Board is, we work under a permit process with the state. And even though the plant is upgraded to 10 MGD, the permit still is at the 7 MGD level. So they have a series of items they are requesting us to perform. And one of them is install new groundwater monitoring wells. These are small diameter monitoring wells, 3-4 inch diameter. And the state only allows you to put them in the ground maybe 30 or 40 feet into the first initial area of groundwater. And unfortunately, over the last 7, 8 years, 9 years, we've had declining groundwater conditions, and our monitoring well systems, unfortunately, are all dry. So one of the conditions to get that permit up to speed is to install new monitoring wells. This project went before it has been designed. Management plan has been in front of council, and city council approved a contract back in January to install those items. And they should be completed by August 22, which will allow us to start collecting groundwater data once again on the wells and update the state's requirements for what's basically happening into the groundwater under the wastewater treatment plant. The other items are future items that are coming up from 23, 24 on through 25, 26. And the plant needs a few items to be addressed. In particular, the headworks, we call it here the influent lift station, but it's basically the headworks facility, which takes the effluent coming from the city and lifts it up so that it has some head and it can move down through the system. It needs improvements. We have some issues with it, and we have to do a study and figure out what's going on. But there are some basic issues that we have to address. And then there are the permit requirements the state's going to require from us to make improvements to the plant to get it up to that 10 MGD level. In particular, some of the technical stuff at the plant, the sludge thickeners, need to be addressed. They need to be replaced, and the digesters need to be cleaned and perhaps lined to get us up to that 10 MGD level. All those items that I've discussed here are programmed from this current year up through FY 25-26, and those are included in the CIP. That is the only projects I'm discussing. If you have any questions on those, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions from my colleagues? I know all of us have been out there within the last year, take a tour. We see the need definitely for improvements. And we know what happened on Schnorr back a few years ago, and we don't want to see a repeat of that. So,
right. And the plant was built roughly the same time as the pipe that was in Schnorr. So we want to watch that closely.
Most definitely. I don't see any other questions. So thank you very much for that report.
Thank you.
Did you need to continue? I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, I am completed. Thank you.
Thank you.
This was a slide that I had last year in the presentation, and I wanted to bring it forward again to kind of show you what our outlook was with our very aggressive sewer CIP. But then I also wanted to report on this slide that with the allocation of the ARPA funds, or the American Rescue Plan funds, it shows that we are able to fund these projects without going in the negative, and that at the end of year 5, you're about right where you want to be with your capital outlay reserve. So that's allowing us to move forward with all of these projects. Any questions on sewer before I move to water?
Councilwoman Gallego.
Thank you, Mayor. Alan, the question I have is, we as council members put that ARPA funds towards capital improvement. So when we do see those projects that you listed, will it say funded by ARPA so that we would know that's where the 20 million went to? Will it be stated somewhere in there?
It's not in the document per se. In the sources and uses under sewer capital outlay, it's just a revenue source, ARPA. We internally have identified which projects it's going for, and we can certainly provide that information maybe with the budget document when it moves forward, or we'll add it into the CIP document.
I would like that if possible, so that we can identify it when we're looking through it.
Okay, yes. I know the water project that was mentioned, the Dunham one, that was funded with ARPA funds. That was one of our first projects. And so the whatever balance of funding we need for the Avenue 13 sewer trunk main, that's going to come from the ARPA funds. So we will definitely put that together.
Okay, and since I'm on that path, that's another question. It doesn't have to do with sewer, but maybe you could answer it while you're here, is that we did get money from the Veterans Housing Facility to put in sidewalks. How do we know that money is in when we look at our capital improvements and it's looking for sidewalks like with Washington School? Is it somewhere that states that that's the funding that's coming from that?
That particular one, it's all charged against a project that we call R94.
Okay.
That's the number. And it's, I think even in the title, it's AHSC is in the title. And actually, Transit has some components of it that David discussed. And then later in the presentation, we will also be discussing the sidewalk portion.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes. Steve, if you want to report on the tanks? Steve Betancourt has been handling, he's picked up a lot of our projects, and he's had the pleasure of working on our 2 tank projects.
Did you climb all the way up there, Steve, to the top of the tanks?
Would have liked to, but wouldn't have been appropriate for me to do that.
Hey, we want to know.
I'm Steve Betancourt. I'm a senior civil engineer at the engineering department. Mayor, council members. It's commonly called the million-gallon tank here in town. It's the Loy Cook water tower, named after Loy Cook, who was a water superintendent in the late 50s and 60s. Tank was built in 62. It's obviously old. And there's been some deterioration. Public Works has been good about keeping it upgraded as much as they could. But we hired a consulting engineering firm that does this kind of work to evaluate the tank from 2 perspectives. One is the interior and interior lining and the exterior painting because it is lead-based paint, and also to do a full structural analysis on the tank because it hasn't been done before. They use laser technology to map the tank from drone and from the ground. They put a diver inside the tank to inspect it, which I found kind of interesting. A little claustrophobic for me, but so they've done that work already. They're in the process of doing their evaluation. We haven't gotten the preliminary results back yet, but verbally they've said it's in pretty good shape. We do expect there'll be some upgrades that we'll have to do to it in the coming months. We plan on going out to bid this year and having a contractor do the painting and any modifications that are needed. The other tower is the D Street water tower, which is a smaller one. It's only 80,000 gallons. It was taken out of service, I believe, in 72, something like that. So it's 100 years old. So it's been there for a while. And so we've hired the same consulting firm to evaluate it. Now, there has been prior engineering work done on it. And it was stated back then that there's an evacuation plan in place in case something happens. So currently he's done an evaluation, and I'm going to be bringing a report to City Council with options for what to do with the tank. But it can't stay as is. I mean, something will have to be done.
Before you go, I'm just going to ask a question on that. That's pretty serious. I mean, obviously, if you have an evacuation plan in place, the Frank Burgon Center is right there. are we looking sooner than later? Is there kind of like a timeline? You said that you're getting a preliminary report. You haven't got through that yet, but it just sounded very concerning when you said that. So
it is. The original engineering report that was done was not a real thorough report in the sense that structural calculations weren't done on it or anything like this. It was more of a visual report. So it was very conservative in their conclusions. So this current report, they actually measured everything and did I think about a 50-page structural evaluation on it. So it's not as bad as was originally thought, but some work needs to be done. We do know foundations are going to have to be enlarged, but painting and things like that will have to be done. I can't get into the details, but we're going to bring to you three options for the council to consider.
Thank you.
I mean, we understand the historical nature and so. Pardon?
Yeah, I want to allay some of the concerns with regard to the evacuation plan. That, as Steve indicated, that was part of a report that did not have a structural analysis with it. The current structural engineer, he was asked specifically whether there was any near-term concern with regard to the safety of the tank. He indicated there was not a concern. Otherwise, we would have brought that forward to council months ago.
thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Did you want to ask a question?
Yes. Steve, I had a question. So I'm looking at the study that we did for the inspection of the inner lining of the water tower. And so forgive me because I just got this. And so I'm trying to go through it while we were here because I only got through part of it. We just got our binders yesterday and I was on a bus all day. So 22-23, we're looking at construction of this contract to do the inner lining of the tower. Mm-hmm. And so how do we do that when there's water in it?
We'll have to work with Public Works on that, but the tank will have to be drained. So there will be subsequent water tanks probably just to keep the system pressurized and to keep available water around, but it won't be drained and just sit there.
Right.
So there'll be a backup.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, again, kind of similar to the sewer list of projects. A lot of these projects are carryovers from last year's CIP. However, we have made progress with the water main replacement across the Fresno River. We are getting ready to bring to you a phase 2 of the engineering consultant services agreement for the actual design and construction documents. We did some initial preliminary assessment and kind of vetted what permitting requirements were going to be needed. And so we're going to be moving into the next phase for that project. Regarding the water meters, Steve is project manager on that project. We have a consultant that is inventorying all of the areas where we thought there weren't meters and or old meters that need to be replaced. We've actually found there are quite a few locations where there are meters installed, and it's just a matter of programming it and getting the meters and utility billing talking to one another to transfer the accounts over to being measured by use. And but that will result in hopefully completing the rest of the unmetered services. We're trying to capture all of the larger manual read meters that maybe are not reading as effectively. So like 3 inches and larger, those will also be replaced with modern automatic read meters. And then part of the consultant's work is to give us a ongoing program layout, how many meters per year. And so we get on a regular routine of replacing all of our meters in the city. Say, if it's every 10 years, a meter should be replaced, but we'll have that program going and budgets to go with that. So again, there are several pipeline projects that have been noted either to increase the size or if there's gaps in our system from a fire flow perspective. So we'll be bringing those projects hopefully again through the on-call contract handing those out and getting those projects moving. Also this year, we're moving forward on our larger storage tank. We have made progress in some site selection. We've narrowed it down and are in the process of getting information on project site appraisals and title reports. And then we'll be bringing forward a recommendation for site for that. And then that will allow us to complete the environmental for the project, in which case we can move forward with design drawings. And also if we want to seek other funding sources, the environmental needs to be complete for that. In the 22-23 CIP, it's the pipeline replacements that have been identified through the condition assessment. Those will be part of the projects. Public Works has requested funding for replacement of, I think it's 3 per year of the chlorine analyzers that go on the well sites. And then we will also hopefully move into phase 2 of our condition assessment, similar to the sewer system. Outer years in the CIP, we see completing of the tank and the pipeline and the pump stations that go with that, and anything that's addressing the aging infrastructure. So similarly, this was last year's slide on our capital outlay funding picture. And then again, with the ARPA funding, we are ending with reserves to carry us into the following years and address other items that might come up that we haven't identified yet.
Excellent.
So the storm drain program, it's a very short slide because the funding, as you know, has not been able to be increased in many years. And so the funds that are accrued go strictly towards maintenance and operations, and we're not able to build up any capital reserve for projects. So there is a Proposition 218 ballot process in place, and I believe the ballots are due, and there's a public hearing on that July 20th. If that's successful, we will have several projects to bring forward and program in the CIP.
Excuse me, Ellen, if I may just add to this slide. Parks Director Joseph Aber earlier this evening alluded to a grant that staff had applied for in excess of $7 million under the Town and Country Trail. As part of that, the greatest portion of that request to Congressman Costa's office back on April, thank you, on Easter, was for a new storm drain. And that storm drain, the $6 million sound about right for? Yeah, approximately $6 million was a request for a new storm drain. The primary reason for that is because, again, going back to what Ellen said, the storm drain fund has not been increased since 1992, and there are no funds available for capital projects for drainage. That's obviously a problem, not only in the older parts of the community, but it kind of peppers the community. We do have some localized flooding, unfortunately. And whenever it rains, the city has a very large group of public works employees out there in the rain trying to manage that with water pumps, unclogging drains, because again, we do have localized flooding. These are some of the challenges that we have as a community. We're trying to address them as best we can. And that's why we made the request to the Congressman's office. So going back to what Councilmember Rodriguez said, hopefully he's listening because we severely need your help. Thank you.
You say 92 or 82?
92.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was it?
The year, 92.
Yeah, since 1992. Back when I was born.
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
All right.
So that kind of wraps on from my end the sewer, water, and storm drain. And we're moving into roads unless there's any follow-up on the
You
other.
want to ask a question,
Yeah,
Mr. Rodriguez?
I just want to reiterate what our city manager said. You know, the $5 million, I think, we can account for them. The cost of $5 million. You said they're already programmed, but
I've seen it in the legislation.
So, and that's good news that you've seen it in the legislation. And again, the fact that there's $7.1 million also coming well, we applied for it. So, I mean, this constitutes for a consideration of maybe a boulevard in his name or maybe a statue even at my house, but certainly would appreciate anything that they can do. So
He may not want the sewer main, named
No,
after
I think we should.
He'd be fine with that.
You realize that they could still put a red line through the budget.
I'm sure they can. So
Just
one of the
in
questions
case.
I was going to ask you, Ellen, is looking at that picture with the main across the Fresno River. Just curious, I know how deep is that main?
Well, right.
That stretches across.
Well, you can see in the picture that it's not deep at all. It's on the surface just about in some areas, but it will be put much deeper. There has been some question is, can we get it deep enough so that maintenance activities won't damage the pipe? So that's one thing our consultant is looking at. There have been some other alternatives proposed, which would be rerouting it along the Gateway Bridge because it crosses right there at Gateway and Central, crosses the river over towards the tank, the large tank. We could potentially hang it on the Gateway Bridge and then go under the railroad that way. But that's a much more expensive project. So.
And going deeper, does that create a problem with grade, more cost?
Not with the water system per se. It's going to be the length of the pipe, but because it's pressurized, it should be able to address the change in elevation.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be honest with you. I would see that as almost a hazard. But I got to say, I never walked that river down with that pipe sticks out like that. So I was thinking that was below ground.
This portion, it's in the vicinity of the new undercrossing that we put in by the railroad. That's, I don't know how it's fared during the this river clearing, but it's right in that area.
Chief Watson?
I'm sure it's fine. Yeah.
Is it painted blue like that for visibility?
Exactly. Yeah.
I remember it being blue when we.
Yes. I do want to make a point. The funding, I believe it's 3.5 million from Costa's earmark.
Whoa. What's going on?
I think it was 3 point. If I said 5, I was mistaken.
Yes, and we do have just a couple of points of clarification, if I may, Mayor.
Absolutely.
Congressman Costa, through the omnibus bill, he did go up to bat for the city of Madera. He was able to secure $3.5 million for the Avenue 13 trunk rehab. We have made a more recent request to State Assembly member Ana Caballero, where we requested an additional $5 million for the Avenue 13 trunk rehab. So we have 3.5 in the bank. I'm going to say in the bank, we haven't received it as Ellen indicated, but it has been awarded to the city. The $5 million, my understanding is that it's currently in the state budget, but as that budget process goes through, I cannot state with confidence it's going to remain, but staff is doing everything it can to try to keep it on the list. And then we made a more recent request to Congressman Costa. That was the $7.1 million made a couple of months ago. Almost all of those funds would be for the drainage. And then a smaller portion of those funds would be for the Town and Country trail. I'll call it reconstruction, even though the existing trail is non-existent in some portions.
Thank you for clarifying that, Arnoldo. And thank you, Ellen, for the presentation.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wrong button. Okay, so here we are moving above surface to the road systems. And I will start with our road rehabilitation program. We've been fortunate that the funding sources for road rehab purposes continue to increase, where at one time we thought they were going to be cut short because of COVID and people not out and about. It seems to have held steady. Our local tax measure, the Measure T program, with everybody either shopping online or shopping in town. We've seen those revenues continue to increase through this, and MCTA has reported that they expect to see even a surplus over what was projected in 21-22, some additional funds that will come to the agencies to be able to reprogram. So the gas tax funds are reportedly higher and projected to continue to increase. That's the RMRA funds. The SB1, the LPP funds are a match program that is allocated to Madera County, and we have an arrangement with the other agencies to share those LPP funds. And then again, as I noted, Measure T is holding steady. This is showing our revenues since a little over 10 years ago on those funding sources, how they are increasing, and the yellow line is the RMRA funds. So what that is allowing is our, not only engineering can do more 3R, which is resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation. We can do more projects, large scale, but then funding is also made available to Public Works so they can enhance their maintenance activities, their crack filling and pothole patching. And if they want to pursue some other seals in certain neighborhoods, they can move forward with that. Kind of matching the funding source. This map, I know it's hard to see. This is showing all the streets that have been touched by engineering projects in the last 15 years, those 3R type projects. So we're starting to fill in the grid here. There are some neighborhood projects I think that Public Works did a few years ago. They may not be represented on here. And if we can get that data, I think it would be fun to show it on this map, showing what areas have been addressed. Going forward, this project we hope to have out this summer is the next seal and overlay project. It's called R79, and it's, I would say, 80% design. So we're close to being able to put that out. Last night, council meeting, you approved a list for the 22-23 RMRA funding list, and this map is the streets that were on that list. I do want to mention, before I go into traffic signals, we have a pavement management program that analyzes all our collectors and arterials, and that's what generates what streets should receive the treatment next, what types of treatment. The goal is to try to capture them before they get in really bad shape. And also streets, maybe they're only 5-10 years old. We want to preserve them. So we'll do some treatment to them so they stay at that level and hopefully not degrade further. At the moment, our local streets, it's like a site survey analysis, but we do have in this year's CIP, it's for the pavement management system to evaluate all of the city streets. So it'll be the local streets, and we need to do the collectors and arterials again. And that is going to tell us exactly what the pavement condition index is, or PCI, of all of our streets, and then help us moving forward in prioritizing those projects. Okay, traffic signals and also pedestrian safety devices. Of course, this past year we did finish and we were able to flip the switch and turn on Howard and Granada and Howard and Westberry. And also the Hawk signal on Stadium Road near Alpha Elementary. This year, we will be going to construction with the crosswalk that was funded with HSIP funds. There'll be flashing beacons, not a Hawk signal, but the pedestrian actuated flashing beacons and enhanced striping and median islands there by Town and Country Park. We're under design for a new signal at Cleveland and Granada, and also D and South Street. Those are under contract and we're about 60% design. I'm hoping that we can see construction starting on those in the spring. If you recall, the last time, the lead time for signal equipment is months. So I'm going to be realistic and say maybe spring of 2023. A project that I did not list on here, but is also funded with CMAQ funding. It's modifying the traffic signal controllers, which is the computer that operates the traffic signals at Howard, Olive, Pine, Yosemite, and Q. And it's going to be it's called an adaptive system. So with improved detection, it should be able to better react to the traffic as it moves through those two intersections there with the different school schedules and commercial traffic. So I'm kind of excited to see how that one works out. When the Olive project moves forward, there will be 2 new traffic signals in that project. And this year, a new project in the CIP is a signal at the intersection of Lake Street and Sherwood. It's been on our radar, and it does receive public concern. And after an analysis this year, where we do a traffic study and we look at the collision diagrams over the last few years, it does now meet warrants for a traffic signal. So it has been added into our program for design in 22-23 and construction in 23-24. Just a map of where all those signals and pedestrian safety items will be. And then next is the larger scale transportation projects. We don't have any roundabouts yet, but I'm thinking someday we will.
On Caltrans.
So yeah. My kids tease me because I love roundabouts. And so anytime we're in another city, they go, "Look, Mom, there's a roundabout." Our Olive Avenue project, it's progressing, albeit a little slower than we would like. Dealing with franchise utilities and the railroad is always kind of delays things. So, but we are the demo was done 2 years ago. I think we've reported that. The undergrounding of the utilities, we're like this close. We have to provide a feed to a new electric pedestal that operates the railroad gate arms. So we have to put in a new pedestal. Of course, that has to be approved by the railroad and PG&E and our building department. And then we'll get that in, and then our contractor can put the conduit underground, and that will require a road closure, but hopefully only a day, to provide the conduit to that railroad signal cabinet, and that will complete the backbone of the PG&E undergrounding. And then PG&E can move in and start running new wires and eventually take the wires off the poles, and the poles will be gone. Hopefully that will be making good progress probably by late summer or fall. In the meantime, we're working with the railroad to get our agreement for the railroad crossing widening. Once that is secure, then we can we'll be able to move forward with advertising the project. So hopefully next year in 2023. The other big project on our list is the Ahmed Avenue gap closure project between Stadium and Pine. That came out of a session like this a couple of years ago as a recognized need with the new development. And so it moved up in priority, and we have funded for not only a traffic study of the corridors and the circulation in that whole area of Stadium Road, Howard, Pine, and what would be an Almond extension and the Freedom Industrial Park. And then the recommendations from that will go into a design for not only the Almond Avenue gap closure, but then we'll also look at anything that's recommended at maybe Howard and Pine intersection and anything else that might come out of that study. So the design will start this next year. And again, this is one of those that the on-call consultants, we've got traffic engineers that are also submitting proposals. So hopefully we can move forward with this really quickly. Depending upon what kind of right-of-way might be needed on the Almond project, that's going to drive the construction more than anything, is how much right-of-way, and if we're able to secure an arrangement with MID because we have the canal there and any other right-of-way issues. So this is our Olive Avenue project footprint. And here's the Almond Avenue project. As you can see, it parallels the MID canal. So that's going to be, I think, the trickiest part of the design. A couple other projects in the outer years, the Pine Street reconstruction, that's just north of Howard and Yosemite. I think that the need for that will be driven by that study, and we'll see what recommendations are made for the Howard and Pine intersection. And then to move these projects up, the Lake Street widening project, it stays on our list, but it's been moved to the outer years just so we can address these concerns. And again, here's some pictures of those locations. Another project that we're moving forward, not this year, but in 2 years, I think, we will be able to secure funding, I think, because of the revenue stream coming into Measure T for our regional pot. These are the Tier 1 dollars that go countywide. The Cleveland widening project from Schnorr to 99 to increase it from 4 to 6 lanes is in the program, and it's the next city project to be funded. So we'll start with our design phases, and if we can upfront the money, we can get reimbursed from the tier funds when those come in on a cash flow basis into the county. So if we use our own Measure T money, say in 24, 25, if we don't get the tier money until 25, 26, they'll reimburse the city for that cost. So there will be an agreement coming between us and the authority for that. But I just wanted to point that out, that this is a project that we do see moving forward, definitely in the next 5 years.
Maybe Councilmember Rodriguez could get in and out to pay for some.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be great. Since we're on that there, might I ask, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry. Thank you
Go for it.
I thought we needed a break.
There was in our previous capital improvement projects, the 2 to 4 lane on Granada. Is that still something that's considered a project that's coming up? I remember, I think we were talking about out by in between not Granada, Howard and moving out south. We're thinking about maybe adding a pedestrian deal there, but we had stalled that because essentially there was a bigger project planned to have a 2 to 4 lane. Is that still something that we're considering? We have a temporary crosswalk out there, and there was a request at one time to add some permanent fixture out there, but
yeah. So a couple of slides ago, it's budgeted. If we go back a couple of slides,
the crosswalk was also budgeted for that.
Yeah. So the crosswalk is budgeted specifically. It's the first item.
Okay.
It's the first bullet point, Granada and industrial crosswalk. And maybe Keith or Ellen can explain the acronyms.
I think we both have it. Yeah, this is the crosswalk to get to Town and Country Park. Yeah, the original grant called for us to have funding by March of this year. That was a bit too long. So what happened was Public Works Department installed the ramps themselves and the crosswalk and some of the signs. This project at the top here completes that with other improvements, including a physical median island and the rapid flashing beacons, right?
The reason I asked the question earlier, Ellen, was because in looking at the project that's going through Cleveland from you said 2 to 6 or 4 to 6 lanes. My understanding was that there was a proposal to widen Granada as well from a 2 to 4. Was that not the case?
No, that's yeah. I don't recall planning for that just yet. We typically do. I apologize if I may have confused at some point in the past. We were looking at this crosswalk, considering the possibility that Granada would eventually go to 4 lanes.
Okay.
And that was one of the reasons where we started looking at the rapid flashing beacons. With 2 lanes, the crosswalks, we don't consider them I don't consider them quite as much of a concern. But as soon as it goes to 4 lanes, the safety concerns go way up in terms of the ability to hurt pedestrians. So I would have mentioned Granada going to 4 lanes at some point in the future, which is why we were doing extra measures, which included a median island in the street and the flashers.
Got you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
So that completes the presentation on our major street projects, and then more of a complete streets approach, which is a term that you'll hear more and more, and that's the bicycle pedestrian components of the roadway. We have several projects under design and hopefully will be under construction next year. The Schnorr Avenue from Sunset to Riverside, filling in the gaps of the missing sidewalk, that's funded with CMAQ funds, and we have a consultant working on that project. Same consultant is working on projects to install sidewalks on Della Valley and Austin, serving the Washington Elementary School. And so that project also should move forward. And then this next slide, I was hoping to bring in Jonathan, one of our project managers, who actually is seeing all of the different phases of this this AHSC project that we were talking about. So if he's available, I can't see if he's on the screen. So speak up, Jonathan.
Thank you, Ellen. And good evening, Mayor and Council members. Can you hear me all right? Just want to check.
Yes.
Wonderful. So yeah, to talk a little bit more about the AHSC, I'm overseeing the other additional part, which is some improvements that are sidewalk related or the school related or bicycle as well. So we split the project into 3 different portions. First of which is the improvements at George Washington Elementary. So there we are installing flashing beacons. We're rebuilding some of the ramps to make them ADA compliant, and we're upgrading the striping on Della Valley and on Della Valley Lincoln and Della Valley and South. And then we also split out into another part, the bicycle lane installations. So we're installing about 2.5 miles of that. You can see, unfortunately, we had a miscommunication. It's 2.5 miles of bike lanes. And then we have, actually, it's not, that's correct. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it. And then we are also installing in a different portion 3 miles of sidewalks. Now, for the George Washington improvements, those are released for construction bids right now. We are estimating they'll be done by August, hopefully before school gets in. That's our aim anyway. The bike lanes is currently under design, as well as the sidewalks. Over 3 miles of sidewalks is right now we got proposals back, which we're reviewing. So hopefully we'll be constructing those early next year. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, okay, perfect. So here you can see a quick map of all the areas where we'll be doing the 3 miles of sidewalk. As you can see, in some areas, we're redoing entire sections, adding sidewalk. Other areas, we are just doing short bits of connectivity sidewalk to make sure that pedestrians can get where they need to go safely. And that's all. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
I don't see any hands raised on this issue.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification. So we have 2 projects right now around Washington Elementary. One was the CMAQ one I mentioned before, and then this one is specifically at the entrance to Washington Elementary and on the other side of it. So hopefully you'll see that at your next council meeting awarding that contract. All right. We are coming to a close, shortly. Bridges. We have a couple bridge rehab projects that's funded with federal bridge preventative maintenance. They are on deck for this year to complete design and hopefully advertise for that. We have the Granada Pedestrian Bridge. We received CMAQ funding for that, and we want to move that to design this year and start the permitting process. And that's for a separate pedestrian bicycle only bridge that would parallel Granada. So we're not, it'll be in that same alignment, but it's not attached to or part of the vehicle bridge. It will tie in well with the trail there on the south side. The Westberry Bridge construction, it is funded for design in 22-23, and we hope to be bringing a contract proposal for the design of that in the next meeting or two. So we've been moving forward with the consultant that was part of the original bridge concept design, and so now it's the next step. So the full funding for that bridge is, as you'll note in the CIP, it's not available yet, but having the bridge design plans done, we'll be able to better evaluate the costs and perhaps go for grant funding and plan for that. I put the Granada Drive Bridge widening because that is often brought up by the public in various areas with concerns because it's so narrow. And so we have nominated that in the Measure T Renewal investment plan. And so if that moves forward, that will receive funding. And then in the meantime, we continue to seek additional funds if possible to widen that bridge. Sometimes we include studies, significant studies in our CIP because they usually lead to capital projects. In this case, a couple of years ago, we received a grant to do a study of Yosemite Avenue as a downtown Main Street. And what that resulted in is cooperative agreement with Caltrans, and they expanded their maintenance project on Yosemite Avenue to include the complete streets components that have been presented to you in the past. So this was just to highlight that even though it's not our project in the CIP, it is a project that came out of one of our studies. And rolling in to the end of the presentation, at least from our side, after you've received and considered this and the CIP document and the staff report, we would recommend approving a minute order accepting the report and authorizing submittal to the Planning Commission for the conformity determination. But of course, we welcome feedback, comments, questions, anything, direction at this time.
I was serious a while ago when I was mentioning Mr. Rodriguez regarding putting some monies into the improvement of the living quarters for the fire department. And I want to know what your response would be to pushing back monies toward either renovation or building a brand new city hall. Correct me if I'm wrong, or kind of enlighten us. How much infrastructure do we have for our existing staff in our facilities? Do we have vacant facilities in the city?
So in terms of the city, in terms of non-essential or in terms of, I'll say non-emergency buildings, the city has City Hall, which we're in, which we are out of space. Right now, if one were to walk around the city, there what appears to be empty offices, none of them are really empty. Rather, we've adopted a hybrid model due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's why some of the building may appear vacant, but they actually belong to folks. The engineering building, which is the former redevelopment building on Yosemite, they are very tight on space. I think we're in the process of ordering a couple of new cubicles that we're converting an open area to additional cubicles because we have added staff for many of the reasons that Keith and Alan went over this evening. At the John Wells Center, we do have some vacant offices on the first floor. As we're bringing programs back, that's an area where we do have some vacant, a couple of vacant offices. I can't state with confidence exactly how that's going to look here because one of the things you'll notice in your packet agenda or in last night's agenda, I think it was item B2, we have added significant staff to the Parks Department. And as we're restarting a lot of the programs, we continue to add staff. The Frank Burgon Center, that would be the senior center. We've opened it back up. There's only one small office there, and that's for city staff. So the entire facility is used by seniors. at the Public Works building / Parks Maintenance Office on Gateway. The building itself is a former auto dealership. It's the former Madera Auto Center. There are some vacant buildings along Gateway Avenue. There are a couple of other areas that are used for storage. And that's a building that we are currently assessing. The plan is to relocate some of the parks maintenance staff and demolish the former house that's being used, that's commonly referred to as La Casa or La Casita. I think if our staff is very familiar with that building, that's a building, to put bluntly, should have probably been demolished many, many years ago. And quite frankly, I'm embarrassed as a city manager to say that that's one of our facilities. The plan is to relocate that team over to the front part of what used to be the parks admin staff, right along Gateway. And so as we do that, we are going to use a couple of offices for some of the senior staff level of the parks maintenance team. We've had several discussions. We've toured the facility. We're simply coming up with the game plan right now between Joe Aber, myself, and Lieutenant Foss to best accommodate the staff. We have, in terms of offices, I think I covered most of them. I know the police department is bursting at the seams with the building, and that's why the city had previously purchased the Massetti building. And even then, it's extremely tight there as well. The trailer that's located on the north side of City Hall, that's a triple wide trailer. The former home of the engineering team still houses three of the construction inspectors. The plan is that once we order, or once the new workstations come in for the new engineering building, which again is a former RDA building, those employees will permanently relocate to the RDA building or to the new engineering building. And we're hopeful that we're going to be getting rid of the trailer. It's not in great shape. I'm not going to say it's collapsing, but again, it's in poor shape. So in terms of space needs for the office staff, right now we do have some vacant office space at the John Wells Center. And there's probably a couple of vacant spaces at the Public Works yard. I'm trying to think of spaces relatively tight at the wastewater treatment plant. The bathrooms are not in good shape. The employees made a makeshift employee break room. That's a former garage bay. And I quite frankly, I think they deserve better. In terms of the fire stations, Fire Station 56, that was built, I think, in the 60s, and Fire Station 57, which was built in 1978, if memory serves me. In Station 56, the bedrooms, which are located on the eastern side of the building, they're more of a dormitory type style. One of the items that Chief Watson and myself have been discussing, along with Chief Garcia, is coming up with the game plan, which is included in this year's budget, to commission a study with a subject matter expert that specializes in first responder stations, such as fire stations. One of the things we'll be doing is we'll be coming up with different alternatives for what to do with the station. I know Chief Watson and myself we've met on site, and one of the items that we discussed is potentially removing the living quarters, which are located to the rear of the building furthest away from Lake Street, adding new living quarters closer to 4th Street, and then adding drive-through bays. So adding roll-up doors to the rear of the building. The principal reason right now for that is the fire engines, when they're returning from calls, they actually have to reverse on Lake Street, and that's dangerous for both the community and our firefighters. And so as part of this, the plan is to bring in, again, a subject matter expert. We'll sit down as a team, our engineering department, our building department, our planning, and most importantly, the fire team, and making sure that we thoroughly go through it. The more pressing need is Fire Station 56. And then at that point, once we determine our needs, we'll start looking at 57. They're not going to be done in a linear fashion. We're not going to wait for one for the other, but rather we'll be doing them right around the same time. The only reason why I think 56 is a little bit more pressing is because, again, the Lake Street issue, because, again, trucks are stopping traffic in all directions, and I think it would be a lot safer. In terms of City Hall, there are zero plans to reconstruct City Hall. That's been a carryover from, I think, from a lot of years. There's zero funding available to my knowledge. While I would love to build a new building, I don't think the city is in a position to begin to explore options for that. I think the city has much greater needs than a City Hall. And that's not, I'm not quite sure how some of our employees will feel about that, because they spend a lot of their lives here. And this is the building where they probably spend more time here sometimes than they do at home. And again, I would love to sit up here and say, we're going to break ground on the City Hall. I just don't think it's going to be in the immediate future. I think, again, the city has more pressing needs in other parts of our community that I think will take precedent over City Hall. So hopefully that answers your question there.
Yeah. So in other words, what you're looking for is that money would go toward some type of renovation adjustment of City Hall and facilities, as opposed to putting it in the bank and waiting to build a City Hall in the future.
No, right now we have not established any savings at all to build a City Hall. And in the next couple of years, I'm sorry, Keith. So are you going to correct me? And that's for city facilities in general, right?
For city facilities.
Okay, so there is 1.1. I can assure you there are zero plans to build a new City Hall. 1.1 sounds like a lot.
Yes.
A building like this, I hate to say it's a drop in the bucket, but as we all know, it's not gonna go very far.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you. Since you touched on it, Arnoldo, I do have a question for you and also for you, Ellen. Arnoldo, what's been the assessment now since COVID? I know that, when COVID hit, we rapidly, had to, just adapt to the moving parts of working from home and all that. But in the public sector that we're in, especially looking at City Hall, have we done a full assessment as to how many employees really have to be here in this building? I mean, I know then when we talk about capacity, consolidating more offices maybe to try to save costs, but even the assessment of, certain positions that may not require to be here. Is that something that we've considered?
Yes, we absolutely have. And we have not done a single study. Rather, department heads, we meet weekly. And at the beginning of every single meeting for the past 2.5 years, that's the item that's on top of the list. One of the things we're talking about is how do we recruit new employees? How do we retain existing ones? And how can we get the job done in the safest possible manner? For example, in most offices, in most of the personnel that work in an office that are not in the field, we provide employees a lot of options in terms of can they work from home? Do they have to come in the office? So, for example, only because she's sitting right in front of me, we have the city clerk's office. There's 2 people in that office. They rotate. So one of them is always in the office, and then kind of while the other one teleworks. In the city administration, there's a total of 3 personnel. Both myself and Azima come to the office every day, where the 3rd employee teleworks. So one of the things we're attempting to do is trying to be smart about it. We're trying to provide options for employees to telework. Some of the challenges with that is not all of our employees have the luxury of doing that. For example, our utility billing staff that interacts daily with customers, we do have to have those employees here. So that could potentially create other issues, because some employees may potentially say, well, why does that employee get to work from home and why do I come in? So we're working through those items. But one of the things that we're doing is we're very open to teleworking. We do have employees that prefer to work in the office, even though we've asked them to work from home at times, and they prefer to work in the office, and that's okay. And we have other employees that prefer to work from home. So it's a juggling act. And I wouldn't say that we have a set standard for any employee. Rather, what we try to do is we try to be as accommodating as possible to try to meet their needs and also the organization's needs.
And I say that only because when I first got elected, I remember then all of our meetings, most of the staff was here. And now it becomes staff can be from Zoom and still be as effective and productive. Again, some may argue, but as technology advances, I think you'll probably be able to assess that in a later time. I just thought I'd ask because, with all these offices that you have out there to maybe vacant, and consolidation for certain departments certainly will fit a model if that so fits. But thank you, appreciate that. Hopefully in the future, maybe there's a different assessment in regards to how we consolidate those, or maybe working from home may be the future. I know that in my business, it seems like that's the norm. I have a 1,800 square foot building, and it's me and one of the loan officers. And other than that, everybody else works from home. It's sad sometimes, but I mean, we still get the jobs done,
Absolutely.
So now for you, Ellen, you brought up a good point. You talked about the construction pavement index, and so for us that don't understand how that works, can you expand on that and let us know what that index represents for our roads here in the city, and where should we be and where are we?
Sure. So the acronym, it's PCI, and it's Pavement Condition Index. And that it's a number that basically it's a score for the condition of your roadway. And it's based on several factors, like the roughness of it, the drivability, the cracking that's in place, and the severity of the defects. And there are different ways you can take the measurement. Some of them it's a visual, some of it it's like a digital camera that is attached to a vehicle, and as it drives over the streets, it collects all the data about the existing condition, and then it goes into an algorithm that tells you what the score of your street is. And much like your grades, 100 would be perfect, and 50 is not passing. So right now, the city of Madera, it's been a while it's been over 5 years since we did our study, but I think our average was, and I don't want to be held to this number, but I think it was around 62 or 63 was what our PCI was at the time. Our goal, and the goal that we're working on with the Measure T Renewal as well, is we'd like to see our streets at or above a score of 70, an index of 70. So that requires additional investment to bring really poor roads, and those take reconstruction, and that's very expensive. So that's a lot of dollars covering not as much square footage of road versus maintenance, preventative maintenance, which your dollars stretch a long way, but it holds your pavement at a higher score. So that's the process, is then balancing your program to try and spend money on the roads that really need it, but yet also spend money on the roads that are pretty good shape, but then they'll stay in good shape.
Now, you mentioned 62. That's what the grade that we have, right, is 62?
Yeah, and I'm going from memory on that one.
And that's fine. And so that is an average of all roads in Madera, correct?
All of the arterial and collectors. Those are the ones that we studied, that had the analysis done. So we haven't done it for our residential streets yet, but that's what we want to do this year.
Okay. And I may throw you a curveball here, but you don't have to answer it if you know this, but the 8% difference that we need to get to that 70%, do you have an idea of what that cost is to bring that to that level?
It's a lot. We'll start there. No, it was hundreds of millions of dollars to get our entire network above a 70, let's say over the next 15, 20 years. Yeah.
And I know sitting in the steering committee that that PCI for the whole county was in, I think, I'll say billions.
It was, yes, upwards of that. And the county has severely deteriorated streets. Their average PCI was much lower.
Yes. So I just kind of want to get an idea of because a lot of these capital improvement projects that we have, I know they continue to roll over because there's not enough funding to get us to that state. But that PCI is an indicator of how our infrastructure, specifically roads, can be, it's deferred maintenance at times, and dilapidating roads obviously create more issues. And if we leave them for long, if we don't fix them for long periods of time, then that PCI goes down even further. Therefore, the cost gets higher and costlier for not only for us, but our residents, and especially, I mean, here in the city of Madera, we suffered from that because it really comes from our general fund. So when it comes to these projects in these 5 years, I mean, I want to see everything completed, right? But obviously the funding is not there. So we need more Jim Costas that want to continue to give us more money for sure. But thank you. Thank you, Ellen.
I think we're good. I don't see any hands raised. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilwoman Gay.
Alan, I think this question is for City Manager Rodriguez and for Keith. Keith mentioned that we have city facilities, 1.something million in a CIP fund for that. So my question is, City Manager Rodriguez, thinking out of the box, even though we're talking CIPs and it might have to do with CIP/budget, since that's coming up soon, we have a lot of city facilities like, I know we've done some improvements to the continuation high school, the gym. What do we call that?
I still refer to it as the Sugar Pine Gym, but
Well,
I don't
Mount
believe
Vista,
it's,
Mount Vista
yeah,
for
Mount
Madera
Vista Gym.
Unified, but we call it, Madera Unified city calls it something different. Well, that gym, we've done a lot of improvements to that gym. We've done some improvements to St. Bergon, Frank Bergon. But how about the Rotary Youth Hut? How about West Side Center? How about our pavilions at Rotary Park? How about some of the pavilions that are Town and Country? Thinking out of the box, in order to make more money for that fund to rent these facilities, we need to do some improvements. So we do have some money in that fund. Is it something that we can put in the budget or another capital improvement project to put forth to put little bit of fun here and there so that those facilities get to be where they need to be so that we can rent them to the point where we're now bringing in major revenue to help the city out?
I'm going to quickly say, yes, we can.
Okay.
I'll confess that the general government impact fee had escaped me. And that was simply, I quite frankly, I'm sure wondering, how can I forget about $1 million? It wasn't on my radar. In terms of some of the facilities that Councilwoman Gallegos spoke about, some of those items could come under the parks development impact fee. More recently, as council's aware, city staff recommended and council approved using some general fund dollars for some of the facilities. For example, Rotary Park was $50,000 or $55,000 in this year's budget. Town and Country Park was another $50,000. And so one of the items that we've attempted to do is we've attempted to hold some of the development impact fees because we know we have to make some larger investments, Sunset Park, the completion of Millview Park. So there's some big ticket items. With that being said, we have a lot of need in a lot of our parks. So one of the things we've attempted to do is try to maintain as best we can. If one were to go out to Millview Park today, more recently, we did a lot of painting. We started cutting some of the rafter tails on the canopies to make them more presentable to the community. We also more recently did an assessment to the Westside Community Center. Some of the staff here had alluded that it was condemned. We've done some analysis. We have not found any record of the building being condemned. And we did a more recent analysis. We brought in a third party to assess the study, but to notify us, was the building ever properly condemned? It has been closed for a number of years. And as we're going through it, I'm not confident that it's condemned. And we know we do have a tremendous amount of improvements that we need to make. So all that to say is absolutely we can. One of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to be very strategic. We're trying to identify some grant funding, for example, like McNally Park. We did apply for Proposition 68 fund for over $4 million for Millview Park. We were not successful in that particular grant, but we're going to continue to try to get some grant dollars for that. So we strategically try to make small improvements to make the buildings more appealable to the community. With that being said, Pan Am needs some work, and we're trying to do that now. We made some recent improvements to the Frank Bergon Center. we did a lot of just deferred maintenance on that building. And that was one of the reasons we held off a little bit on opening, but now it's open again. We need a new acoustical system at the Pan Am. And I believe once we do that, I think more people will probably rent it. The Sugar Pine Gym, as I still call it because I'm old, is that it does not have an HVAC system.
Right.
And so one of the things that we're trying to explore is, can we put an HVAC system so then we can rent it and we can use it year round? And I think that's one of the challenges. I still remember being a kid and going to quinceañeras and those types of things. And I didn't remember it being hot or cold, but when you're 14, 15, you're not really paying attention to that. And so those are things that we're looking at. I wish I can tell you that the game plan was better fleshed out as today, but it's not. But those are things that, along with Keith and his team, along with Joe Aber and his team, those are things we're identifying. We're also identifying some other improvements we need to make. Council may recall that for the kiddie pool at Swimming Pool Park, about a year ago, 2 years ago, we added the diving board. Last year, we replastered the kiddie pool and we replaced the motor. And then we had a diving team. We had a leak in the diving pool. We made those repairs. With that being said, we still have to replaster the other two pools. We're going to be reaching out to a couple of firms to get an eyeball, just to guesstimate about what it's going to charge us. Some of those charges or some of those items are not identified in dollars. And those are some of the things that we'll be coming back to council for. So going back to the beginning of the meeting that Keith and Nellen both alluded to, we have some improvements that you're not going to find in the capital improvement program. They're big expenses. They're $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 here and there. But those are the things as we're going through our parks and through our public facilities, we're trying to identify those. Some of those are going to appear like as one-offs and as though there's no grand master plan. But some of it is we're trying to identify dollars wherever we can grab them. We're trying to identify some immediate needs to address some of the deferred deficiencies. And those will be coming before council. I'm not going to say slowly. We're bringing them as fast as we can, as soon as we can identify dollars for. It's a challenge when you have so much deferred maintenance. And one of the things that we've attempted to do over the past couple of years is nearly every public facility has received some benefit from the city. Some of it's small. Some of it, when you're passing by, you'll never know it. But for example, replacing a motor pump at a pool, no one would know it, but we know it because the pool was leaking and we're losing water. And so those are some of the things. The police department redoing the floor, those types of things, repaving the parking lots at the fire station. So we're trying to do a lot of those little things that may appear insignificant, but we know have a lasting impact for both the community and the employees that work in those buildings. So I'm not just sure if that answers your direct question, but I can assure you that we'll be looking at those different pots to see if we can start tapping some of those to make some more immediate repairs now rather than waiting a couple of years.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And so Keith just said that CMAQ funds may work for the air conditioning.
Oh, right.
And that's for the air conditioning at
All right, Keith.
Okay. I'm just aware that Parks Department has made applications in the past for things like new roofs using CMAQ funds. So, I do this all the time. CDBG. So Parks Department has made applications in the past for things like new roofs and things like that. So CDBG can possibly do that if it ranks higher than, say, some of the other options that might exist. Just wanted to go ahead and bring that up and then be corrected by the correct fund. Well, if it reduces dust.
You put another roundabout over there. I think make me happy.
You guys are like
back there.
Teller and Penn, you just look at Keith and you know what to say, right? Thank you. No, I'm just saying, you guys are like Teller and Penn. You just by looking at Keith, you know what he's trying to say.
I don't actually have anything more to say, but I'm not sure whether Ellen did.
Well, we normally have about it's abnormal, but we normally finish this about 10 o'clock. So we got about an hour and a half to go.
Okay, well, I can start talking some more. So there was some questions that I had received before the meeting with regard to such things as Ahmed Avenue, and Ellen started to touch on that. With the on-call agreements coming through, we might have the potential to go ahead and accelerate some other projects. We depend upon funding. We can go ahead and find ways to go ahead and move forward with those other projects as well. So one of the things that I like about the on-call agreements is once we qualify a consultant, we can call them, we can talk to them and tell them what we need. Everything we do in terms of starting a project is fairly intensive if you do it outside of an on-call agreement. So as an example, Almond Avenue, we need a traffic study for that. I've got all that in my head, what I want to do or what we want to do. And we can sit down with a traffic consultant and say, we want this, 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 this. And they can go ahead and write up the scope of work for that, then give us a fee on it. We always have the ability to say, that's a great scope, but you're too expensive. We'll move on to the second person that we have on the list. But we can accelerate things that way. Because just writing a scope can take a 2, 3, 4 days, depending upon whether you've got all the answers at that very moment for the scope. So it's our hope that we can accelerate a number of other things, all subject to what council would like to see, of course. But that's our hope with that on call.
Thank you.
And we do continue to be available for questions because we apparently have an hour and a half we have to fill.
Councilwoman Gallegos.
Thank you, Mayor Garcia. I just wanted to commend your staff for the reports and those staff members that are online. And I think it might have been Nicole who put the binder together. I love the dividers we did not have that last year. So it helped if you can see my little flag tapes a little bit easier this time. So I appreciate that effort that went into that, and for everybody that put those reports together to make this streamline an hour and a half faster tonight. So thank you for that.
One thing I just wanted to say that what everyone else has been saying here, but I remember not too long ago we were in deficits in the city of Madera, and you Arnoldo and your team have done a wonderful job of keeping us out of deficits, and making sure that we are still able to function as a city and create projects that benefit the city. So it's a tremendous achievement compared to what it was not too long ago. Alrighty. I don't see any other questions, so can we move on? Unless you wanted to close out?
Oh, I'm sorry. The slide is missing, but really the last recommended action is to approve the amended order accepting the report and authorize submittal of the CIP to the Planning Commission for determination of conformity.
Alicia, do we have any public comment regarding this issue?
No, Mayor, we've
Item
not
A1.
received any public comment, any written public comment.
Okay. And nothing on Zoom or on the phone?
No, we have no participants.
Thank you very much. We'll close public comment. I'll bring it back to my colleagues for more questions or a motion.
So moved to approve A1 as presented.
Second.
Motion to approve item A1 by Councilmember Gallegos, second by Mayor Pro Tem Evans. Alicia, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gallegos?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Montes?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia?
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas?
Yes.
Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much for that. Your team, thank you very much. We will now move on to item B, petitions, bids, resolutions, ordinances, and agreements. Item B1 is a request for approval of a 6-month tax sharing agreement between the City of Madera and the County of Madera, specifically for the Villages at Almond Grove Association. Annexation, excuse me. Arnold?
Thank you very much, Mayor. The item before council this evening is a request to enter into a 6-month MOU for a tax sharing agreement between the City of Madera and the County of Madera, only for the Village D project. So this is not the entire tax sharing agreement, again, it's only for the portion within Village D. For context, council may recall that the city entered into a 3-year agreement with the County of Madera back in June 5th, 2017. And what that agreement is primarily called for is how property taxes were divided between the city and the county for property within the city limits. It identified the city's sphere of influence, meaning where the city's ultimate growth pattern and how you define that. It discussed police services for Courthouse Park and Parkwood, which are currently in the County of Madera, but they are patrolled by the City of Madera. It also discussed the sharing of the Bradley Burns tax, commonly referred to as sales tax, among a couple of other, what I would refer to as more minor items, but nonetheless very important items for the benefit of our community. That agreement had a 3-year term, and it also offered 2 one-year extensions. Both the city and the county exercised those 1-year terms. That agreement had a sunset clause of June 5th of this year. As council may recall, council certified an environmental impact report and approved a specific plan for the villages or for the Almond project that commonly referred to as Village D. That is an approximately 3 square mile master plan area filed by primarily the Fagundes family amongst a couple of other property owners. That project was commenced, depending on who you ask, 5 or 6 years ago. I've heard as far back as 7 years. That project came before the council a couple of months ago. Immediately following council's action, the applicants approached LAFCO and requested annexation of the entire 3 square mile area. Once that project started getting underway, in discussions with LAFCO and the ad hoc committee established both by the city and the county, it was determined that in order to avoid any potential issues in the next couple of months, that it would be best to enter into a 6-month agreement to allow the annexation process to move forward under the conditions that existed under the previous MOU. So there would be no changes to how property taxes are split for the villages or for the Village D project. As the city and the county continue for potentially a long-term agreement or tax sharing agreement between the 2 agencies, that would override any agreements that exist today. That's the plan. So really what this is asking for is to extend the MOU only for this area, for these 3 square miles, to allow for it to annex into the city. There are no other changes to any other element of the MOU. It's only for 6 months because LAFCO is going to consider this item next Wednesday at the June 22nd meeting, if memory serves me. We spoke with the county as recently. I was in discussions with them as recently as about 24 hours ago, a little bit more. And they agreed to these terms, and the ad hoc committee had agreed to these terms, and that's why this item is before council this evening. Again, it's only for the villages. It's not for the entire city, and it doesn't discuss the various components that ultimately any MOU before this council would consider for ultimate action. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I would be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Alicia, do we have any public comment regarding this issue?
We have no one on Zoom, Mayor, and I have not received any public comment.
Alrighty, I will close public comment and bring this back to my colleagues for any questions they might have. Councilmember Rodriguez.
I just want to clarify something here, Arnoldo. So when the applicant submitted the application for filing at that time, they had submitted that application with the current or the existing tax sharing agreement, correct?
Correct. The application for annexation was filed prior to the expiration of the tax sharing agreement. So the application was filed timely.
So one would say that at that moment, if it was annexed, then that would be the current agreement that they would abide for.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Any further comment from my colleagues? Considering that there is a sense of urgency for the project to move forward, I did consider this, and because this project, this tax sharing agreement has been delayed for years now between the county and the city of Madera, and it's actually hurt the city of Madera economically. It's been a burden on us. But considering the urgency of getting the project off the ground and us continue to improve our community, I think 6 months is enough time for our ad hoc committee to meet with the county and come to an agreement. So I will be supporting this if one of my colleagues wants to make a motion of approval.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion to approve item B1 by Mayor Pro Tem Evans, second by Councilmember Rodriguez. Lisa, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Gallegos?
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Yes.
Councilmember Montes?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Mejia?
Yes.
Councilmember Villegas?
Yes.
And Mayor Garcia?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much all for the work that you're doing. Good luck. We now call adjournment to this regular meeting at the city. At least we don't have any board reports, huh? Okay. We called this meeting to its conclusion at 8:40 p.m. Our next regular meeting for the city council is going to be July 6th, 2022. Thank you very much all, and you all have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.